Hey everybody, this is Fran from the 5 Minute Modeler, and today I'm going to take you through the decisions I made in building my layout and designing it and bringing it to life. To give you some background, I grew up in southeast Michigan and I lived very close to the Jackson subdivision of the Grand Trunk Western. As a kid, I used to walk the tracks and pick up spikes and things like that. When I got married, and I've always been an HO modeler, but when I got married, I got into N scale because I didn't have any space. Didn't have a lot of money either. But since that time, I've been actually modeling the Grand Trunk Western. I've had about 4 different layouts. And as I built this most recent one about 6 years ago, I did a lot more planning than I had in previous layouts. I knew there were a lot of decisions to make. Some things I already knew. For example, I wanted to model the 1970s. I wanted to model the Grand Trunk. I wanted a shelf layout. I was going to model somewhere in Michigan. I knew it was going to be point to point. But I didn't want to get real specific with sites and locations and things like that. I just wanted to model kind of a fantasy railroad, if you will. And so I started to do some research on different railroads, and I came across one of many. It was called the Grand Rapids in Indiana, and it actually ran from Cincinnati to Mackinac City, Michigan. And at Mackinac City, it actually would interchange with the Port Huron, Detroit, C&O, and there was a ferry there that went across to the Upper Peninsula. So I was intrigued by that. And interestingly, the railroad had a nickname they called it the fishing line. And they would bring tourists up, this is back in the 1800s, and they would bring tourists up from the southern part of Michigan and Indiana up to northern Michigan in the summertime because it was cooler and there were a lot of lakes and a lot of recreational type things going on. So one thing I didn't know was, how did I want to design this thing? And so what I did is, as I read up on that, about the same time, I started taking a fishing trip up to northern Ontario with a buddy of mine, and we've been going every year for about 12 years. And one of the cool things about this is to get to the lake that we go to, you have to take either an airplane or a train. And Via Rail up there in Canada has a train that runs from one part of Ontario to the other, and it actually drops people off at different fishing lodges and locations along the way. And they don't have stations; they just drop you off at the site. Not even a siding; they just drop you off where the lodge is, and then people from the lodge would pick you up and take you down there. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. I think I want to model something like that because I wanted to have some passenger operations. I've never done that on my layouts, and so I wanted to try a little bit of that. But it wasn't going to be any, mainline like 1960s, 1950s passenger trains where you had multiple trains running every day and all of that. This was just going to be some moderate passenger operation. Really, I was focusing more on the freight side, but I did want to have that. And so that helped me to develop the design for this layout. I knew I was going to have towns all along the route where the train would stop and pick people up and take them to different parts of northern Michigan. But I didn't want to model things specifically. And so in the process, I took the names of towns and I added them to my layout, but I didn't add them in the order of the route. I just made them places on the layout. And I had a couple of industries that I liked and that were from other parts of the railroad and Grand Trunk and whatnot. And I would model something like that with the same name, but it wouldn't be the same. So I had to have a plausible story for this layout. And what I determined is, since I was modeling in the 1970s, there was a gasoline crisis where there was no gas, and people would line up for hours trying to get a little bit of gas. And so I thought, well, this is a good reason that the Grand Trunk might have an operation that runs up north. However, they didn't have anything that ran much past Flint, Michigan. So I designed kind of my own story with that. And what I determined to do was to fantasize, if you will, about the Grand Trunk purchasing the Grand Rapids and Indiana line, which at the time was actually owned by the Penn Central. It had been owned by the Pennsylvania, but the Penn Central was going broke at that time. And so my thought was, okay, Grand Trunk, buy it. They were the Good Track Road. It was their slogan. And then they would run it profitably, encouraging people to take the train to go up north. And along the way, they would service the industries along the way. So that was the theme that I took and designed, again, the layout around those ideas. So there's a reason for the layout. It's there serving a purpose. It might be fantasy, but it's not far from what a real railroad would do as they build their layout going north, south, east, or west. So again, we're going to have more episodes going into some of the details of the locations. It won't be as specific to the actual location, though I may show some maps and whatnot. But stay tuned and keep an eye on future episodes as we delve into the various elements, the yards, the sidings, the different towns, the passenger operations. And I think you'll find it interesting, especially if you're new to the hobby and you've moved beyond just running trains around in circles. So thanks for watching another episode of the 5-Minute Modeler. Stay tuned as we will have additional episodes on my layout. So take care and have a great week.